We're going live.
Thank you, Steph. Governor Gordon, it looks like we have the team assembled. I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. Please, please proceed, Anthony, if you want, and off you go.
And we'll do a roll call for quorum first. Commissioner Racines.
Here.
Commissioner Meyer. I think he may be excused for the time being. Commissioner Pope.
Here.
Commissioner Navas.
Here.
Commissioner Revel.
Here.
Commissioner Wallace.
Here.
Chairman Gordon.
Here.
Chairman Gordon, you have a quorum, and I am happy to quickly go through the bill of play here, if that's all right with you.
That'll be perfect. I have the materials in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this should be a fairly quick discussion today. We are simply going through one document, which is the RFQ4 appeal memo. We'll go through the context for that, but again, we have looked to qualify vendors in the past as part of our ongoing procurement process. Appeals are possible through our procurement rules, and we have received a few of those. And one that we will be discussing today is one that perhaps the commission will recommend to be a qualified vendor for the purposes of our procurement process. Beyond that, we do have another special meeting coming up in the middle of February, on February 14th. That'll be another quick hour of discussion to kind of update on our procurement process and make determinations about which of the qualified vendors who submitted proposals will be brought on to perform oral interviews for our evaluation committee. And then following that, we'll have the full formal monthly meeting of the commission on February 27th here in the Wyoming State Capitol. Again, this is intended to be a quick meeting today, so there will be no public comment. And with that, I will quickly read my disclaimer before we set off here. Key decisions pertaining to the Wyoming Stable Token Initiative will be made by the commissioners of the Stable Token Commission or the state legislature in public meetings such as this. At this time, no blockchain has been selected for deployment of Wyoming stable tokens, and no Wyoming stable tokens have been issued. Further, the only commissioners are those appointed by statute, the governor, or a majority vote of the commission. Information outside these public meetings should only be considered factual and legitimate if it is distributed through our official channels. At this time, these are limited to our website at stabletoken.wyo.gov, the Wyoming legislature website at wyoleg.gov, and our social media channels with the @WyoStable username on Twitter, YouTube, GitHub, and Warpcast. And Mr. Chairman, unless there's any other questions, I would segue right into our memo.
If there are no questions, I think we can proceed. That'd be great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So hopefully this is showing up on everyone's screen and everyone has access to these documents. Again, the action we're looking to do is approve appeals received regarding qualified vendors for RFQ4, which is specific to reserves management. I've cited our statute and procurement rules as our authority to do so. And should the commission not agree with the content presented, of course, they could reject the appeal. But for background, the commission approved 7 RFQs, requests for qualification, in late November, which kicked off our procurement process pertaining to the development, deployment, and ongoing management of a potential Wyoming stable token. We had a monthly meeting on December 19th where the commission agreed to re-advertise RFQ4 specifically because of some of the nuances involved with how vendors were forming, either trying to form consortia or were proposing as funds, and making sure we kept the same questions and criteria to extend our RFQ out until December 27th. By that December 27th date, 59 submissions were received from 11 potential vendors amongst the 8 functions of RFQ4, which again spans from investment management, custody, and several attestation support functions. And those results were documented in the results memo sent to the commission on January 3rd, and we did have a special session that day as well. Qualified vendors were presented and ratified by the commission on a per function basis. So as I noted a moment ago, The memo that we put forward did provide clarity and context around the fund structure that several of the vendors were proposing to provide the book of work as. And we created some structures around that to make sure we could accommodate existing funds that were already formed, legally recognized, and acting in this digital asset space. There were two key pieces of context that we had to make sure that funds that were qualified were already active. So as you see here, to apply as a fund, there were these two qualifications. One, funds had to be already structured, either through a legal entity that already existed, for the purposes of achieving qualified vendor status. And then we looked to documentation that already existed to certify that those relationships were present and active. So one form that could take was, for example, a private placement memorandum or prospectus for a fund that was already formed. We had another caveat on it, which was that if we were going to assess funds for their qualification, then we would do just that, but as one cohesive unit. So if there were 2 entities in a fund, if there were 6 entities in a fund, it was still going to be treated as one cohesive whole. And if vendors, potential vendors, wants to qualify individually, they would need to register as a vendor individually and submit RFQs individually. And we did see some of that in the last go around. So I won't replay necessarily the RFQ4 results memo, but that is what we laid out, and our qualifications were aligned as such. As I mentioned earlier, applicants who were not found to be qualified were allowed to appeal our findings, and that's in Chapter 2 of our procurement rules, specifically Section 6, request for review of denial of pre-qualification applications. And to move forward with the results of that appeals process within the context of RFQ4, we did receive 2 appeals from applicants. One applicant applied holistically as a fund, and they were found not to be qualified due to insufficiencies of their custodial partner. Their appeal indicated that they wanted to substitute a global systemically important bank, or a GSIB, in that custodial function. But however, we had to deny that appeal because, again, the legal structure was not yet formed. There was no agreement, no PPM that would indicate that GSIB was part of an existing cohort. And further, that GSIB did not qualify independently during our process for vendor qualification, which kind of prohibited them from being part of a modular component as part of a fund, which again was one unit. So that appeal was upheld. However, we did receive an appeal from Franklin Advisors, Inc., which submitted vendor qualifications for all 8 functions of RFQ4. Franklin Advisors did qualify for several of them, 5 of them to be specific. Those included investment management, included attestation support, and several other functions. However, in its original submission, Franklin did indicate that it outsourced a custody role and a daily net asset value calculation to a different financial institution. And as such, they did not qualify for those 3 functions. When Franklin sent us a appeal documentation, which you have in that shared Google folder that we have for the commissioners, they asked us to reassess it within the confines of the Franklin On-Chain U.S. Government Money Fund. And that's what our team did. So for context, the Franklin On-Chain U.S. Government Money Fund is a U.S. registered money market mutual fund that is offered and issued on blockchain in tokenized form. And that token is called Benji. And I've referred to that entity here as the Benji Fund for simplicity. The Benji Fund is inclusive of Franklin Advisors, Inc., and JP Morgan Chase Bank as the custodian and the provider of the daily net asset value. We did ask for documentation to evidence this relationship and make sure that we could review some of the numbers that these organizations are generating. So we did look at a signed letter from an ED at JPM that confirmed the organization was party to this relationship and also intended to continue providing custody and NAV services. And we also received a prospectus and a statement of additional information from the Benji Fund, which was quite detailed. Our agency members reviewed that new documentation to assess the capabilities and qualifications of the Benji Fund as a holistic entity, supplemented by the existing documentation provided earlier in the RFQ process. To that extent, the director's recommendation would be to approve the Franklin On-Chain U.S. Government Money Fund as a qualified vendor for all functions of RFP4. And as a quick note on this, regardless of the commission's determination, Franklin Advisors, Inc. would still be deemed a qualified vendor for the RFPs in which they initially qualified for. That said, JP Morgan Bank, since they did not submit individual vendor applications, they would not be considered qualified for RFPs 4.2, which is custody of fiat, 4.3, which is custody of treasuries, or 4.4, which is the daily NAV. And that is functionally it. So I want to quickly turn it over to the group for any questions on the outlay here, what's being asked, or any of the documentation thereof. Happy to answer any of those questions for you.
Questions from committee members? Joel, did I see you had a question?
No, sir. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, Anthony,
Commissioner,
this is Jeff. I got a question, if I can.
Yes.
On that first GSIB that did not qualify, did they submit an RFQ, and what disqualified them?
So great question. And for clarification, this GSIB is a institution that actually is part of one of the other funds that did qualify. I know that's slightly confusing, but because this is a entity that was part of an existing fund structure, they did not qualify individually, similar to how we're discussing JPM at the moment. They did not submit a vendor application form. They did not submit RFQs for our specific functions, but they were part of a holistic package put together by one of our qualified vendors. So while that GSIB could have potentially helped this fund qualify because there was no existing agreement in place at this current time, that's why we did not bring this fund forward in the process.
Great, thank you.
other questions? If there are none, all right. Members of the committee, you've had a chance to review the materials and the discussion. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the Franklin On-Chain U.S. Government Money Fund as a qualified vendor for all functions of RFP 4, 4.1 through 4.8.
Thank you, Commissioner Pope. Is there support for the commissioner's motion?
Second.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Racines. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nays? Commissioner Racines, your microphone seems to be on. Director Apollo.
Mr. Chairman, if there sounds like a unanimous vote to me. So in that capacity, the team will reach out to the Franklin On-Chain U.S. Government Money Fund and let them know of the qualification ahead of the RFP submission date, which is still going to be February 7th. And that would be functionally the substance of today's conversation. Again, we intended this to be a very short meeting to qualify one of the parties that we felt had a appeal that would change the initial determination. I think we've accomplished that today. And unless there's any other questions from the commissioners, I would suggest a motion to close us out.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.